They call her Severine Devaul, and depending on who you ask, she was either a gifted healer or one of the most ruthless con artists to ever set foot in South America. When this story begins, Severine is 61 years old, living quietly in a small village outside Lyon, France, and by all appearances she looks like someone's gentle grandmother. White hair pinned in a bun, soft sweaters, slow voice, polite smile. But beneath all that softness is a woman who has spent decades learning how to make desperate people trust her. She understood something most scammers never fully grasp. When people are suffering, emotionally, financially, physically, hope becomes a currency. And Severine? She knew how to sell hope better than anyone. The idea for her biggest scam didn't come from brilliance. It came from boredom and greed. In late 2007, she discovered a niche online community obsessed with ancient herbal cures, the kind that promised everything from reversing aging to curing chronic disease. And seeing how easily people believed these claims, an idea began to take shape. It started as a joke to herself. What if I created my own miracle cure? But within a few weeks, it became a full-blown plan. She would invent a powdered herbal medicine she claimed came from a remote region of France, derived from plants that grew only in the untouched, mineral-rich soils at the base of the Cevennes Mountains. She named it Essence de Lumière. In reality, it was dried nettle mixed with powdered chamomile, cheap, harmless, and absolutely useless. But before she could launch her new product, she needed a place where people were vulnerable enough to believe her, somewhere foreign enough that it would take longer for authorities to connect the dots. And so, in January 2008, she arrived in Peru, a country she had never visited but strategically chose for one reason. Herbal remedies were already culturally familiar. People were more open to alternative cures, and hope traveled fast. She started small, renting a cheap hall in Arequipa using a fake name, Madame Solène, and hosting natural healing conferences. She advertised the events through flyers, radio ads, and local women's groups, all promising the same thing: a French expert bringing ancient European medicinal knowledge capable of curing chronic pain, fatigue, infertility, anxiety, arthritis, and even helping people look 10 years younger. And unbelievably, the hall filled. Mostly women, mostly workers, vendors, mothers, people who didn't have access to reliable healthcare and were often desperate for relief. The perfect target. Severine walked onto that stage wearing a white linen dress and a silk scarf like some sort of mystical healer. She carried herself slowly, deliberately, like every movement had profound meaning. And she spoke in that comforting French accent people associated with quality and sophistication. She told them about Essence de Lumière, a rare herbal powder used by European nobles for centuries. She claimed that pharmaceutical companies had tried for decades to replicate it, but the real formula was still only produced by a handful of families in France, hers being one of them. She was a master storyteller, and her timing, tone, pauses, they were perfect. When she spoke, you could see the audience hanging on to every word. Then came the pitch. Each person could start their own micro-healing business using Essence de Lumière. She claimed she had exclusive contracts with European wellness brands desperate to buy natural herbal products from South America. All they needed to do was purchase a starter kit, priced at the equivalent of $350, to receive a small bag of powdered herbs and instructions on how to cultivate more at home. She would buy back whatever they produced. They would earn money. Their communities would gain access to rare healing remedies. Everybody would win. Except none of it was real. But Severine knew how to bait the hook. Her earliest customers, just like in many scams, got their kits for free. Then, a few weeks later, she paid them profit. Not because she sold their herbs, but because she used money from the new recruits. And that was enough. Word spread through villages like oxygen feeding a fire. Soon, her conferences were full. She expanded from Arequipa to Cusco, then Puno, then Juliaca. Dozens of towns, hundreds of people. She targeted poor mothers, elderly citizens, and struggling families, people who would cling to any promise of financial freedom or healing. By early 2009, Severine had nearly 3,000 active participants, each buying kits, each producing worthless herbal powder, each believing they were stepping into a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And Severine, now operating under 2 different aliases, was already a millionaire. Her scam grew even darker when she introduced the idea of ambassadors of light, people who brought in more buyers. They received rewards, kitchen appliances, small trips, jewelry, cash bonuses. And just like that, the villages turned into recruiting machines. Women went door to door. Husbands sold livestock. Families pooled their money for investment kits. People who had never so much as considered herbal medicine suddenly believed they were participating in something world-changing. And Severine? She watched it all unfold from the penthouse apartment she rented overlooking the city center of Lima. What made the scam so cruel wasn't the money people lost. It was the hope they invested. Severine wasn't just selling herbs, she was selling futures, dreams. The belief that life could finally get better. But like all Ponzi schemes, the scam had a timer. By mid-2010, Severine began struggling to find new recruits. The original participants were expecting larger payments, and the only money she had to pay them came from new victims. When the flow slowed, her profits to customers weakened. People noticed. Whispers began spreading. Some said she was traveling too often. Others said they weren't receiving payments. Some wondered why she never let anyone meet the European companies supposedly buying the herbs. Then came the first cracks. A group of farmers from a village near Puno tried calling her office. No answer. They visited the building. It was locked. They asked her local assistants for help. The assistants had quietly disappeared days earlier. People started panicking. Meanwhile, Severine already had a backup plan. She transferred her remaining funds to an offshore bank account, packed her belongings, erased every trace of her Peruvian identity, and boarded a flight back to France under a different passport. She left behind nearly 7,800 kilos of powdered herbs sitting in rented storage units across Peru, worthless bags of dried leaves that had once represented the dreams of thousands of people, now molding in humid barrels. When the truth became undeniable, chaos followed. People flooded local police stations. They clogged phone lines. Some sold their cattle and now had no way to feed their families. Some had given up their jobs to pursue this healing business. Women cried in the hallways of municipal buildings. Husbands fought each other out of anger and desperation. Villagers held community meetings demanding answers. That's when a popular investigative Peruvian news program, Ojo Directo, entered the picture. The moment they caught wind of a foreign woman scamming thousands of citizens, they launched an investigation. They interviewed victims, grandmothers, street vendors, young mothers. They filmed the abandoned offices. They located one of the original kits and had it analyzed in a lab. The report: it was nothing but cheap herbs you could buy anywhere. The final blow came when the TV crew visited one of the storage facilities and filmed, in a single heartbreaking wide shot, rows and rows of industrial barrels, stacked floor to ceiling, filled with rotting powder. Nearly 11 tons of useless miracle medicine. The footage went viral across Peru. And the story didn't end there. The reporters traced Severine's documents, her aliases, her rental contracts, and eventually discovered her real identity. They tracked her all the way to France, specifically Lyon, where she had returned to living her quiet grandmother lie. And when the reporters confronted her on camera outside her neighborhood bakery, she denied everything. She claimed she had been framed. She claimed she barely spoke Spanish. She claimed she had no connection to herbal medicine. But the evidence told a different story. The Peruvian government contacted Interpol. Interpol contacted French authorities. And by late 2011, a formal investigation into Severine Devaul was underway. They discovered her history of small cons across Europe, fake vitamins, fake wellness clubs, fake meditation retreats. Nothing this massive, but enough to establish her pattern. In 2012, she was arrested. Her trial became a media storm. Thousands of Peruvian families watched updates from across the world. Survivors of her scam submitted testimonies through video, letters, and community groups. The French judge described her as one of the most strategically manipulative con artists the wellness industry has ever seen. She was convicted on charges of international fraud and money laundering and sentenced to 7 years in prison. But the story doesn't end there. Because in 2021, 3 years after her release, Severine Devaul was arrested again, this time in Portugal, running yet another pyramid-style wellness scam involving anti-inflammatory sea moss powders. She never stopped. She never learned. And thousands of people across South America still live with the financial scars she left behind. What makes this case so haunting isn't just the money she stole, it's the people she targeted: poor villagers, women in desperate situations, families looking for a way out. People who invested their hope in a stranger who looked like a healer, and turned out to be a predator. Severine sold them salvation. But what they really bought was a lie, one that cost some of them everything.